Hello students! In our previous video, we learned about various methods of asexual reproduction. Today, let us learn one more method of asexual reproduction, that is spore formation. And what do you think a spore is? Spores are microscopic single-celled reproductive structures present in a sac called sporangia. And which organisms use spores for reproduction? Some simple organisms in bacteria, fungi, some simple plants like algae, and some flowering plants like ferns and mosses reproduce by spores. Let us understand this in detail. But wait, before we start, why do you think plants produce fruits and seeds? It's because animals can eat these fruits, and when they leave the seeds or throw these seeds at faraway places or behind them, plant can spread itself, a new plant can grow, and thus plant can spread itself in the ecosystem. Thus one tree produces multiple seeds and become multiple new trees in turn. Thus what a seed does to a tree is what a spore does for lower organisms. In short, spores are babies that grow and develop into mature organisms and don't need mom and dad for their formation, just like human babies or other developed organisms need. Yes, spores are formed by any one parent. Both are not required. Now, the advantage of this method of reproduction is that organisms can survive in harsh conditions for long period of time. This is important because organisms may not always get favorable or good conditions to grow and reproduce. So what it does is, it packs its genetic material into packets called cysts in the form of spores. And when conditions are good again, these cysts release the spores and grow into new individuals. And thus one individual becomes many new individuals. Because spores have a hard covering called a cyst around them, it protects them from nasty conditions outside. When favorable conditions return, spores germinate or grow into new individuals. So now you can understand how seeds and spores work. Both of them grow to the new individual. But remember, one is sexual mode and requires parents and the gametes, while the second one is a sexual mode which involves only one parent and no gamete formation. Have you ever seen such a thing on a bread slice or wet curtains in your bathroom during monsoon? You'll be able to see complex structures like this, which is made up of few threads and ball-like structures. Yes, we often see white or green cottony, bad-smelling outgrowths on their surface. They are molds, or scientifically rhizopus, a kind of fungus. Now bring a microscope and look at them closely under it. You will see thread-like structures called hyphae. Different parts of this structure have different names. Can you see this root-like hyphae? They are called rhizoids. And these vertical specialized hyphae are called sporangiophores. And what are these pipe-like hyphae called? They are called as stolons. At the end of these vertical hyphae are blob-like structures called sporangia. And do you know, it is the main reproductive organ for these organisms. It contains very small, tiny spores. At maturity, these sporangia bursts open and release spores into air. Spores are dry and very light, so they are carried to distant places by air, and they stay there in air for long period. Now whenever they come in contact with water or any moisty surface, they germinate to produce new individuals. This is exactly what happened with wet bread or wet curtains. Spores were already there in the air. As soon as they come in contact with water, they started growing and formed a new colony there. This surface from which spores get support and nutrition for their growth is called the substratum, which in this case can be bread or a curtain. Similarly, many larger algae they produce large number of monospores. For example, this red algae species. These spores have thick walls and are non-flagellated spherical cells. That is, they cannot move since they don't have flagella. They are released and carried by water currents and form a new organism upon germination. While some green algae produce non-motile spores called aplanospores, whereas others produce motile spores called zoospores. These zoospores lack true cell walls and bear one or more flagella, with which they can move to a more favorable environment in which they develop into new algae. Note here that the flagella allow zoospores to swim, whereas monospores and aplanospores lack them, and hence they have to rely on passive transport by water currents. Spore formation is also observed in many bacteria like Bacillus and Clostridium and several other disease-causing bacteria. From them, when nutrition is depleted from the medium or adverse conditions are created, the bacteria grows and it initiates spore formation. Now the cell is referred to as mother cell. Next, the DNA is copied and cell membrane pinches inward to form developing spore. This is called as forespore. This spore continues to develop further and turns into a protein-coated small cell. This is the matured spore, and it is released from mother's cell body. Bacterial spores serve largely as a resting or dormant stage in the bacterial life cycle. They help to preserve genetic material of bacteria through unfavorable conditions or harsh times. Many bacterial spores are highly durable because of their structure and can germinate even after years of dormancy. So students, we have seen spore formation in many simple organisms like fungi, plants, algae, bacteria, etc. One thing common to all of them is that spores are tiny microscopic reproductive cells. They are produced when conditions for organisms are unfavorable and harsh. On the return of favorable conditions, these spores grow and germinate to produce new individuals. In our next video, we will see some more interesting aspects of reproduction.